The Gulen movement has come a long way, and people see the overall causes, the things for which the Gulen movement stands. But I think it is also a reality that Gulen provided a sense of inspiration along with a vision. We'll try to talk about diversity. We'll try to talk about their own individuality. Education. I think it's crucial to such as myself, but I'm Alan Page. I spent most of my career at Meredith College as professor of religious studies, some history, and then moved into academic administration and retired from Meredith as academic vice president 4 years ago. I came in contact with the movement through a Turkish student. She was here studying as an undergraduate. We had a lot of dialogue about Turkish culture, about Muslim religion, about Turkish. She invited me to some of the activities of the Advanced Center here, and my wife and I were regular participants in this, and eventually went with a group to Turkey in 2007 and had a fantastic trip there. In learning about the Hizmet movement, and mostly after I returned from Turkey, I did a good bit of reading of Gulen stuff. And I think the thing that impressed me most about his philosophy was the similarities of some of the emphases of our American colonial founders, and, with the emphasis on the common good. And so his emphasis on democracy as being important, and education and democracy being tied together. And as a part of democracy, the free expression of religion, and that is a common theme in his writings as well as in our own heritage. I think education is an important component of that. I think education leads to common understanding and then very positive results from that. The common good in terms of interfaith dialogue, understanding people of diverse backgrounds. And the whole movement has done a lot in terms of poverty and helping to support people who are really in need. We had the mayor of Caseta here a couple of years ago as a visitor, and I remember his comments about the obligation of people who have accumulated resources to help the poor. And I think that's not only an Islamic tradition, but it's been emphasized by the Gulen movement as well. I think Hizmet represents Islam in a very positive way. I think particularly since 9/11, American culture struggled with understanding that whole Islamic tradition. And the terrorists have sometimes been regarded as being the norm when it's not. And I think the whole Hizmet movement has helped us to see another dimension of Islamic movement that is more peaceful. There are things in the Islamic tradition that can be interpreted as encouraging strong, sometimes violent action, but the same can be said of the Christian Jewish traditions. If you go back and look at Hebrew Bible with many of the passages there, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, you could make the case that that is a violent tradition as well. So you've got some of the same issues involved in the Judeo-Christian tradition as you have in Islamic tradition. And I think from my point of view, to see both of those traditions as emphasizing compassion with justice, but also with mercy. The Hizmet movement, I think, has some parallels. I think if you go back in terms of the Rumi tradition, the mystic tradition that's there, the introspective mode that finds its expression in action. If you look at many of manifestations of the Christian tradition that put a great deal more emphasis on spirituality, and that what I would call the progressive movements of Christian tradition that focus on the common good and social justice, and education as the means of achieving this, that there's some common grounds, common threads there with the Hizmet movement. Interfaith dialogue is very important for understanding our common humanity. I think all religious traditions tend to be introspective, but the more we can move beyond the introspective stance to trying to look beyond ourselves to understand others, and my approach is to try to say, what are the common elements? So I think the religious dialogue, the interfaith dialogue, helps us to realize our common humanity. It helps us to understand the common causes that we stand for. And I think just as some people in the United States would have reservations about participating in social justice issues with people that don't share all of the same common theological background, same thing is probably true within Islam. And yet to look beyond that to the common good is an important facet of interfaith dialogue. When people try to talk about diversity and try to talk about their own individuality, I think there's a general tendency that's almost universal to universalize our individual perspectives. And so the real question of me in dealing with diversity and in creating dialogue is, how do we make our own statement of faith claims and value claims without looking beyond them to see the perspective of other people? There are a lot of religions that would like to proselytize rather than to create dialogue where there's common ground. Years ago, I remember reading a South Indian theologian who was asked about evangelism and proselytizing. And I was struck by his answer. It says, evangelism is one beggar telling another where he has found bread without claiming that he's eating from the only loaf there is. So that we all have a lot in common, and recognizing that looking for the things that unite us, combine us, while at the same time being able to affirm the values and faith perspective that is basic to our own religious tradition. When you talk about Gulen's approach to education, I think it's crucial to recognize that as one of the cornerstones of his emphasis. And as an educator, I certainly agree with Gulen on that. In my involvement in the Divan Center here, I've met a lot of people who were products of the Gulen schools in Turkey, and they then went on to universities, succeeded. Many of them came to the United States for graduate work, and a lot of them have gone back. So watching what is the products of these schools and the emphasis on education, it's hard to hard to overestimate what he has done there. I think the Hizmet movement has been effective in attracting people to support it, such as myself, because it really goes back to the common good element. We see a common task, regardless of our religious perspective, and being able to start with that, to build on that, to create networks is all an important part of the process. The Gulen movement has come a long way, and people see the overall causes, the things for which the Gulen movement stands. But I think it is also a reality that Gulen provided a sense of inspiration along with a vision. He may be drawing on a broad cultural background and a broad universal and human dimension. But at the same time that he is drawing on that broad background, he personally has provided some inspiration that he's very modest about claiming. Social movements have to be supported in order to succeed. In our country, we have a lot of government that tends to do that. We have a lot of religious traditions, particularly Jewish and Christian, that have done a lot to support these. I think the Islamic movement with the Gulen's emphasis has the Turkish community simply joining into some common efforts that are already very much underway, and it takes the effort of us all to get it done. The Gulen movement has come under attack from several different angles, and I think that part of it is a lack of understanding, part of it is a sense of jealousy for its success. I think sometimes, as an outsider, it appears to me the government may be jealous of its success and would like to claim credit for some of the things that Gulen and the movement has done. When I see the positive impacts of that, I'm sometimes amazed at sort of the criticisms I see in the press of what the whole movement has done. One of my regrets is that I never had a chance to meet Gulen. He's not really been a public figure in the United States, and so that's been hard to do, but my admiration for him makes that a regret that I've never had that opportunity to meet him. It is very difficult for Gulen to defend himself against the charges that are made against him. It makes it more imperative on all of us who have supported his cause that we be more vocal in our speaking out in support of what he's doing, because he's made such a dramatic contribution.
I think the Hizmet movement represents Islam very effectively in dialogue with the modern world, with modern forms of education on all their levels, and in promoting interreligious respect and tolerance.
It is the fact that most people, if you asked them, would say they want world peace. Of course we want world peace, but very few people actually do anything about it. And the Hizmet movement specifically does go out and put action to their words.